Hello and welcome to the Council, our role in fandom. Today we're talking about Star Wars and Star Wars fandom, and we're going to celebrate and commiserate. And I think Britt just had some technical issues. Britt, you with us?
I'm
Okay.
fine.
So anyway, I wanted us to go around and just quickly introduce ourselves and say how we got into Star Wars. I'm Candace, and actually 27 years ago this month I became a Star Wars fan because the special editions were released in theaters and my dad dragged me and I absolutely loved it. So next, Maggie.
I am Maggie. I got into Star Wars when Phantom Menace was out, so it's only been a few years.
25 years,
25 years.
I have 2 years on you, Maggie.
Don't make me feel old. But since I know I will talk about Star Trek later on, I was already very much a sci-fi girly pop at that point. I was already into Star Trek, Stargate, all the stars, so it was a natural jump to Star Wars for me back then.
Sweet.
Katrina.
Oh, hi. I'm Katrina. Hello. Better known as Katrina. And I also got into Star Wars because of Star Trek. I was raised by a super nerd. We were at a Star Trek convention, and I happened upon a pack of top Star Wars cards, and I was like, what's that? And then that night, I think I was 4 or 5 years old, we went home and watched A New Hope, and I've been radicalized ever since.
Norhal.
Okay, hello. Well, my name is Norhal, and I got into Star Wars a couple of months before The Force Awakens, thanks to wearing the Rey's costume for Halloween pub crawl, and I thought it was a nice costume, but I hadn't watched any of the original trilogy nor the prequels. So I said, yeah, let's get ready to watch The Force Awakens. But just as you watch all the other any movies you prepare for, but I loved it. I thought, oh my god, it took me so long to watch it, and it's been almost already for 8 years here.
Okay, Britt.
Hi, I'm Britt. I honestly can't tell you when I got into Star Wars because I've just been watching it since before I think I even since I was a fetus. I feel like I joke around that I came out of the womb knowing Harrison Ford's name before I knew my own because that man is my mother's idol. And anytime a movie of his was on television, we were watching. So, and according to her, when I was 5 years old and the Phantom Menace was set to come out, I saw the poster and I was like, oh, it's Star Wars. And that was kind of the reason we actually ended up going to a movie theater and seeing it. And, as soon as I saw Padme Amidala, I was head over heels. So, and it's been a love affair ever since.
Okay, and Arzu.
Hi, I'm Arzu. I was raised in a nerd household, so nerd stuff was never optional. Trekkie, Star Wars, Stargate, Star Parents. So yeah, what is it called? The prequels were coming out, and they were like, well, time to catch our kids up and marathon the original trilogy. And since then I've been like, this is pretty cool. I think I like this. So yeah.
Okay, great. And just to say at the beginning, when we say Star Wars is for girls, we mean it's because Star Wars is for everyone. It literally has everything. I feel like doing an SNL like Stefan voice. It has action. It has little teddy bears like walking around. It has, pod racing. Literally everything. So the most interesting romance, comedy,
Yes.
action, everything that you would want is in these movies, TV shows, books, video games. If you like one of those things, you are a Star Wars fan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the history, where fandom, the term came from. And it wasn't until the 60s that it became part of modern. So I was just wondering, other than Star Wars, if not Star Wars, what was your first fandom?
I guess I'll go first. But Star Trek, I think, was technically my very first fandom. It was the very first convention I went to. I went to a convention when I was 3 years old. My mom said that she like had seen something in like a magazine and like talked to me about it because I loved watching Voyager every week. And we saw that Chakotay was going to be there, and I loved Chakotay as a kid. And I was like, yeah, I want to meet him. And she took me to the Star Trek convention, and I met Chakotay. The picture of me, I look shell-shocked. Thankfully, I have to look much cooler when I'm around Star Trek people that I love, but I like danced with a Klingon who was like 5 years old, like a full Klingon, and like it is one of like the fundamental core memories of like who I am as a child. And anytime I go to conventions now I like work at conventions, which is like hilarious to me. But I always tell my mom, like, you're the reason I am this person because you introduced me to like the fandom experience that comes with conventions. And my mom knew about conventions because of her sister who went to like Penzic and did all of the more like high fantasy fandom stuff and going to those conventions and meeting people from those kinds of things. So it was a very matrilineal kind of situation with being in fandom for me as a kid.
Yeah, I would say that my first fandom, the first experience that was like something immersive, something that I contributed to and consumed. It's kind of a general thing, but my first fandom was fan fiction. I was really into a bunch of stuff at the time. I was really into anime and Pokemon, but I also liked Reboot and I also liked Star Wars and Star Trek.
Reboot was awesome.
I love
Reboot was amazing. Reboot the reboot, man. So the first place I was able to kind of centralize that, because I hadn't become a forum girl yet. I was kind of young, and my dad wanted something that he could like put parental controls on, and fanfiction.net had an under 13 category. So that's
I
where
never
we
went
started.
there.
Yeah,
Me was under 13.
I am probably the oldest person here. So yeah, that's how I sort of started interacting with fandom and really understanding it. And then I started going to conventions like seriously. And it's been wonderful ever since.
Well, for me, it was pretty much movies. I would love Marvel, DC, like the beginning of before when the superhero genre went mainstream like it is right now. But I remember, well, also I'm a book lover, and I would I used to love Harry Potter back in the like when the movies and the books. And
before the bad times.
Exactly. The good times, where the movies were released and I was there at the premiere wearing my gown and my cape and my wand and whatever. But it was more like, not yet into conventions, not yet into like cosplaying. Like I said, I would do costumes every Halloween, but for the pop crawls and for parties. But it was more like, what is fashionable now, like Catwoman and after the Dark
You didn't
Knight.
really know cosplay yet?
No.
Right? Like, so it's like, and then you like realize cosplay. You can dress up other than Halloween?
Exactly. Awesome. That's amazing. So yeah, for me, that was, it was more, once I got into Star Wars, it was a more immersive experience. And that's fantastic because, it opened the door to another, like, writing in cosplay and other things as well. So,
Britt, I'm guessing yours was Star Wars since in utero.
I mean, it was definitely a genetic thing. I don't know. It's hard to say if I actually had any experience with like a fandom though, because I'm not sure what our definition for fandom would be, but like ever since I was little, I always had like micro obsessions. And like Sailor Moon was one of them. Disney, I'm a huge Disney kid, and I quite a few of us are, but like, and just oh god, but I'm a huge film nerd as well, and I always had like micro obsessions with different films. Like I remember having a weird micro obsession with like Ella Enchanted and like Anne Hathaway's filmography, and like it was always just the most random movies too. Like Hilary Duff, I had a huge Hilary Duff obsession, and like A Cinderella Story, like Cheaper by the Dozen. Like I remember going to see all of those movies and just obsessively watching her entire filmography. Lizzie McGuire, of course. And I don't really think I had like a real fandom experience until I got into high school and I started going to concerts. And that's a very different like kind of fan culture. So, but like Star Wars has been a part of my life, my entire life. And like, my cat's name was Anakin, my beloved Anakin Skywalker, and he lived to almost 18 years old. It would have been his 18th birthday in September. And like, obviously I have some very permanent markings on my body. So, there's, so like, I feel like that's probably the biggest like geeky fandom that I've been a part of for sure.
For me, like the first public fandom was Star Wars, and that was like relatively recent because before that I didn't really engage with anything publicly. I think part of it was just growing up in a place that didn't have super fast internet, that didn't have wide access to like various sites. So, and like honestly, knowing my personality, thank God, because I would have been a monster. But
I feel like you and I would have had a very similar situation if you had access.
I probably would have burned something down. Like if I had the kind of internet access I do now at 13. I was just a very emotional child. But like I think like Harry Potter was a really big fandom for me, obviously before everything. Sailor Moon I was really into, Pokemon I was really into, but like the first one I remember being kind of like die hard passionate about, and it is a bit different because it's music, is the Spice Girls.
Yes.
Like collecting things and like cosplay and like in my
Those
storage
stupid
closet
sticker
right there.
lollipops.
I have a notebook in my closet of the stickers from the lollipops and the little rings you would get like at the dollar store and all, and I kept it. I don't know why, but like, so I think the Spice Girls was probably my first fandom.
Oh my God.
I love that.
So hard
I love
when
that. I
Harry
didn't
Halliwell
mention that.
left.
No, I love that.
Like my teacher had to call my mom because I was just crying at school and inconsolable and nothing was getting done. Like, so crying my eyes out over Star Wars, really, it's nothing new. This has been done before.
I love that.
Well, that's the thing about fandom is it could be music, it could be sports teams, it could be anything really, anything that a group of people really enjoy, and there's a community of, right?
I have a question. So this might be more applicable to the top three of us who have been on the internet for far too long and fandom. What was your first like forum experience? Because for me, it was two very weird sites to be like interacting with like
As
fans
a child.
as a child, and it was
same.
Neopets and Horseland. Chat boards, and this was like really rudimentary chat boards at the time. This would have been dial-up internet, but I think Neopets was like my first interaction with like the Star Wars fandom, and then from there I went to like the AOL and Yahoo chat boards, and like that was my gateway there. But like that was my first experience with what we have on Twitter now, of like the way that we interact with each other and like find people and lump together in little groups of people that have like shared interests. But I'm curious, like what were everybody here's like first experiences with forums? Because I think that's really the first place you start to see like a true fandom start to build up, because you have the, you know, people who are monitoring things, the people who are maybe not there for the best reasons, the people who are like trying to actively cultivate something to like keep records of people. And I think that's where a lot of fandom is born, is in that forum space where you can have a community.
So first, I just want to say my first online was Gargoyles, and there was a great site, gargoyles-fans.org. It had fan fiction, it had episode guides. It even had Greg Weisman, the creator, being able to ask, you could ask him questions and he would answer them. So it was the first time you actually interact with a creator, like, and that was amazing in my like 8-year-old brain. And it was they had a thing called The Gathering, which was a very small convention, but I was trying to like talk my mom into driving me to Texas to go to one. And she's like, Candace, these are strangers online. I was like, but they're gargoyle fans. They got to be good, you know. You know. But that was one of the like things that really stood out into my mind until I got into Star Wars when just like a year later. But do you guys remember fanforum.net?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I was very active on the Harry Potter side of that.
Wow.
And because I was very impressionable and very easy to convince, I kept switching sides on the shipping. Like I'd be like, "Oh, I'm Harry and Hermione. Oh no, I'm Hermione and Ron." Just like whatever, you know.
Were you in the graphic
Harry and
design
Hermione.
area of that at all? Because there was like a whole
Yes, that was me. Probably some art you saw was me. I actually did I did graphic design professionally for a couple years.
Wow.
Because I taught myself Photoshop because of Star Wars.
I did it because of Harry Potter stuff, because I wanted
to,
like Harry Potter fan fiction, the Harry Potter fanfiction.net website, they would do cover art, and I wanted to make cover art for people, and I taught myself how to use just JASIC Paint Shop Pro.
Yeah. I learned how to code because of Angels Fire and
Angel Fire and Geocities. Yeah.
Making my own Star Wars website. The site was called Jedi's Force. Very original. I know. I was 10. You know, let's move on. But like fandom stuff does really help you learn like life skills.
Yeah.
I know how to code because of it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Same. Yeah. I actually I'm glad that you guys picked that up, because like I became a forum girly a little later than this. I was on the Club Jade forums, the Force.net forums back in the day.
The Force.net. That was
like building fandom websites was how I found like my first real piece of community. I was in this Dragon Ball Z fandom, and I had a Trunks website because I thought he was a hottie when I was like 10. And
you still do probably, right, Katrina?
No, I'm more of a girl, a grown-up girl, Gohan kind of girly. Like he's educated, he's got a really good job, he's a great like brother, dad, and etc. Like I like him a lot more. Like Trunks is kind of like, he's not safe. I feel like I am Trunks rather than I like.
You're
Trunks.
in the wrong room.
I don't know. I know I am. I know who I am among. But back in those days, a bunch of us discovered that we were all women who ran Dragon Ball Z fan sites, and we started a little group called the Webmissies, the Webmistresses, and those people have been my friends for like 28 years now.
That just gave me like full body chills, and
yeah. we created art of each other's characters. We would write fan fiction on fanfiction.net about our Dragon Ball characters, and like we just managed these websites that were like fandom hubs for different characters within the fandom. So like that would be like my earliest thing. And yes, Bulma and Vegeta were also my first ship, and they are still my top ship. See, I can like bad boys too.
Okay, can I tell you guys this little anecdote? Okay, so Florida, effed up, right? Education system, whatever. Grew up here. There's something called the FCAT rights where you have to write something.
I got I hated those things.
Yeah. Fourth grade, I got a 2 out of 6. I was really bad. It was a terrible.
This is like a standardized test.
Yeah, but you had to write. So I was like
awful.
It was awful. I was really stressed out that day. Got a 2 out of 6, and they're like, "Oh no, you know, great." And then 8th grade, when I took it again, I got one of the highest scores in the entire county, the 6 out of 6, like the highest you could possibly get. And do you know why? It was because I was writing fan fiction.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
That's why.
Well, hang on. Like, did you write fan fiction for the test, or you had been writing it in between and it improved your skill?
It improved my skill to the point where I got to go in a limo because the principal took out the people who had 6s to Landry's like seafood restaurant, and I got to ride in a limo when I was 14.
Wow!
I thought that was the coolest. 13 or something.
That's so cool.
Wow. If you wrote fanfic for the standardized test, I'm like, now that's a power.
I know. I mean,
I should have.
And that was the funny thing. I wrote a fanfic when I was in middle school, but I didn't know it was fanfic because
same. I wrote Star Wars.
I had to write a story, but I used Mortal Kombat characters because I love playing arcade Mortal Kombat. So it was like a story using the characters, but like for composition, and it went great. But I didn't know it was fiction back then.
I had this amazing English teacher, because like most queer people do, when I was in middle school, and I think she like recognized my ADHD and was like in an effort to get me more motivated to do like schoolwork. She would allow me, if I completed the schoolwork, to write fan fiction and let her read it for extra credit, so that I would get even better grades. And I wrote just like leagues that I was like fresh into Naruto at that time. That woman was subjected to so much Naruto fanfic, and it was not good.
But you know what? Okay, well, speaking of which, I had a live journal too. I was Doctor Who.
Oh yeah.
Live journal time. That was the time to be alive.
Oh, yeah.
I remember like a really popular girl, like at least like middle school wise. She didn't like reading, but the teacher allowed her to use the computer, and she was reading NSYNC fan fiction. He was just glad that she was reading she was reading at all.
Reading.
The original
So-
direction.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, you know, like
I
It
want to
just-
say before we move on from the topic,
yes.
the first fan fiction I ever wrote was handwritten with color-coded pen. That 70s show fan fiction, self-insert fan fiction, self-insert fan fiction that I turned in for homework on a weekly basis.
Wow.
She never said anything. I guess she was like, well,
I
she's
love
writing.
that.
So, and I'm not 100% sure because we lived in Iran at the time. I'm not 100% sure my teacher had seen that 70s show. So she's like,
how does she know all these 70s references?
she's just rolling with it. No, I inceptioned her because we had to do like a project on something. So because I was obsessed with that 70s show, I'm like, I'm going to do a project on decades. And she's like, okay. So it was like an interview project where I interviewed someone about their youth in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, like people that I knew. So it's like that's where she's getting all the 70s info from. So anyway.
I love that.
I'm fine with it.
Amazing.
My,
Do you guys remember your first fan fiction?
I do.
Okay,
Sailor
Megan.
Moon.
Yep.
It was self-insert.
I didn't write it, but I read it.
It was
If
what?
you're not self-inserting, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
It was what? What fan?
What fandom? I didn't hear it.
Frodo.
Frodo.
You know what? There's Legolas. There's Aragorn. Me, I want the short one with the curly hair and the hairy feet.
No, you do you. I remember mine was a self-insert, but it was in Star Wars, and it was trying to get Han and Leia together earlier because I thought they were so freaking cute. I was like, I worked in the rebellion. I was just like a side character, like literally, like I just like was a mechanic. I was like helping out. But I was like, you should go talk to the princess, Han. You know, kind of thing. It was just literally me trying to get them together.
So
my
cute.
my earliest like fan fiction that I really dedicated to myself to was a collaboration between my dad and I on a Dragon Ball Z Tenchi Muyo crossover where we were also self-inserts and we were helping the characters.
That's so
My dad
awesome.
used to help. My dad used to help me write Star Wars poetry.
Oh,
that's
Yeah,
so nice.
that we put on
this is
fanfiction.net.
so cute.
Yeah.
That's
So like
fantastic.
we were all enabled by our parents, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, my dad was just like a huge Star Trek, is still a huge fanfic aficionado because he was a Star Trek fan, and that's like a source, like what word am I looking for? A life source for Star Trek fans historically. So, yeah.
I love that.
That's so cool.
My mom has told me like recently that she became much more of a Star Wars fan because I was so into it. Because she was always just like a Harrison Ford girl. She's always a Harrison Ford gal. So like it was like my obsession that really got her into it. And for the longest time, I kid you not, like yes, her favorite character in the franchise was always Han Solo, but her second favorite character was Jar Jar Binks. So
Amazing.
That's so cool.
she got me that Jar Jar Binks alarm clock as soon as she could. She bought me the Queen Amidala blow-up chair. She bought me my Padme handmaiden Barbie doll. That woman was a single mother, and as soon as she recognized that I was obsessed, she got anything that she could for me within her budget. And you know, so she's fostered every single thing that, well, she calls me like her monster. Like she made me her monster. It's like she bought me all of my books. She constantly had me watching movies. Quite a few I never should have watched at the ages I was watching them, but whatever.
It happens.
You know, Sigourney Weaver was the figure of my nightmares for a very, very long time. You know, it's fine. It's fine. I'm fine. But, you know, everything I am is because of her. And like, for me, that is kind of why I wanted to do this conversation so much, is because like to me, my mother was always the OG Star Wars fan, and she's the one who got me into it. So, and so all praise to the women in the Star Wars fandom who've been here from the beginning.
Yeah.
Britt, I have to ask, since you were seeing movies way too young, and your mother loves Harrison Ford, did she take you to see What Lies Beneath? Because I saw that movie in theaters in 2000 when I was 9. And it haunted
Wow.
dreams.
I didn't see it in theaters, but she watches it constantly. It's one of her favorites.
Good one.
I don't know if it's just because of the amount of time Harrison ends up shirtless in it, or if it's just because like she likes that he's a baddie in it. But
spoiler alert.
You know,
Is it like
spoiler alert.
I mean,
or a violent movie?
24 years old.
But my mother's worst offense, as far as that goes, is I think Deep Blue Sea came out in 97. And I was, or 98, and I was 3 or 4 years old, and I went to the movie theater to see that with her because she couldn't find a babysitter.
Aww.
So that, but it's fine. I may have had nightmares about some sharks for a long time, but we're cool. I've since been able to watch the movie again. It only took like 15 years.
So, speaking of women in fandom, something interesting that we found out was that women really created the idea of fandom. So, as the Hollywood was growing and their star system was, so was women's rights. So, it all kind of goes hand in hand. Women were getting more freedom and Hollywood was growing. So, with that, of course, women were mocked, which shocked, you know, like our grandmothers and great-grandmothers time was going through this, and they called them movie struck girls, which were women who like actors or movies, which they thought that if you like those, you were undisciplined or self-absorbed, or you were an unfit patron of cinema and, you know, an improbable participant in visual pleasures.
Is this like when they tell us now that we only like a movie because the actors are hot?
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Or even like we're undeserving of it. Yeah. So good to know things don't change. You know, they keep
my brain contains multitudes. I can think the actors hot and appreciate the themes.
Exactly.
I know we're talking about fandom and like media arts, but similar happens when you're a woman who likes sports. Of course, the first thing they tell you, oh, you like the player. And it's like, I can like the game. What's wrong with it? But or I can like both. I contain multitudes as well. So
it's this whole thing between passion and hysteria. Yeah. And it's like, well, if you're a woman, it's going to be hysteria. But then men can paint their entire bodies, go on rampages because their team won. And they're just passionate. So there's some double standards there that, you know, not as much fun.
Yeah.
But Maggie, can you talk to us about how women created sci-fi?
I can, and I do have notes because I am jet lagged. But I did want to also like to get into this. So I got my master's in anthropology, and part of what my thesis was supposed to be before our program changed was talking about women's role in fandom and the way that essentially fandom is a form of culture, and even in culture, women and those who present as women have basically created culture, and then it's the men that basically destroy it. It's like this whole kind of like weird repetition that happens in almost every form of culture. And because women are typically the ones who are creating not just life, but like creating a home, creating a safe space, creating that sense of community that we all long for. You see that reflected in a lot of fandom spaces where you have women who are the ones that are keeping everybody on the Rolodex back when you would like have to like call everybody to like meet up to talk about things. They're the ones who are keeping like up with new emails and website changes. And they're usually the ones who are creating the websites that we just talked about, those of us who are like learning how to code and how to create spaces so that we could congregate. And usually we're seeking out like a safe space. So we're usually also the people who are like the hall monitors in fandom that are like passing information around about who are unsafe, making sure that people are being cared for. You're also, the things that are hallmarks of fandom, which is like fan culture stuff with fan fiction, with fan art, with cosplay. Those are usually in more femme presenting like hobbies, learning how to sew, learning how to paint, learning how to draw, all of those kinds of things, writing. I mean, even, some of the most famous pieces of science fiction, were birthed by women like Mary Shelley in 1818 writing Frankenstein, which is technically the very first instance of science fiction. So there's a lot of people that like to be like, oh no, women didn't create sci-fi. Technically the genre was created by a woman. And you see that reflected in fandom, and in particular with the discussion mostly about Star Wars and Star Trek, you have, Lucille Ball is the reason why Star Trek exists, because she was really the only one who believed in it when it was trying to find a production company. Then you have, Star Trek getting canceled, and you have women, let me get names right here, who were doing the fan campaigns to ensure that the show was renewed. Let me scroll through my notes here so I get the right name right here.
Which Katrina recently made like a video about, like, who's going to start the petition to get your favorite show saved?
That was a fun one. Fanzines too were such a critical part of formation.
I mean, and that's fanzines are where we got, Spock and Kirk fan fiction and the birth of that and that fandom. And that was, again, women who were writing those stories. You had a really great fanzine that was talking about, or I guess it was a letter zine technically, was the Pat Nussman one that was published in 1981 that was talking about where the boys are, which is really like a seminal piece of discussion about gender disparity in fandom. And a lot of that, is very relevant to the conversation that has been going on, throughout Star Wars. And yeah, I mean, it's there. We've been here the entire time, creating this space that now we all get to benefit from and share and, enjoy. The wonderful woman who did the female-led committee to form the very first Star Trek convention was Joan Winston. And then you had 1968, which is the letter writing campaign that saved the series, which was led by Bijo Temple. So it's like, and she's now in her 90s and still going to things and still very much active in her fandom, which again goes so much against like this notion that we see that like once you hit 30, you should be like having babies, getting married, and you're not online talking to your friends about fandom things anymore. But fandom is lifelong. And
you can do it all.
Yes, you can. Again, we contain multitudes. It's shocking.
Yeah.
No,
I can do more than one things at once.
It's just so wild because you see it so clearly that like women are like the heart of fandom. When you see these like men that just kind of like jump and like and fight everybody, and then you have women like ourselves and those that are like throughout this fandom that are just like trying to create something that's civilized and enjoyable and welcoming to everyone and focusing on the idea that it is for everyone. Fandom is for everyone. We try to tend to be more inclusive than other people. So that is my very exhausted rambly.
I will add on to that. Hope mentioned in the chat, looking for Leia, I was the assistant producer of that series, and it's a short form web series that covers not just the contributions of women in fandom, but that early history of women in fandom, and the specifically the continuation of the Star Wars fandom between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, because after A New Hope, fans didn't know that there would be new Star Wars. They had to continue that story somehow, and they took on the role that the Star Trek fans had laid down foundationally, and started creating fanfic and zines about where Han and Leia and Luke went next, and what the Jedi were, and their perceptions of it are so interesting and so cool. And I love it. So if you go to lookingforleia.com, it is free to watch there, and you might see some familiar faces.
Highly
It's an
recommend.
incredible series.
The number of people, because I watched that documentary before I became super active online,
Same.
and rewatched it recently, and the number of people in that documentary that I now know personally, that I count as some of my like very good friends, is just shocking to me.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Like how differently it views now.
I completely agree. It's just
A work of art.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, growing up in fandom and stuff like that, like I found in fan fiction and fan art spaces to be like mostly female and more like safe places to be in fandom versus more of like a forum somewhere where people were just arguing constantly.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think the fan fiction side and art like attracts mostly females?
I think that's
So-
because I was gonna say, like, it's a discipline that we're usually pushed towards, reading and writing and creating. I mean, we've seen that throughout history, even, going back to those were the things that would attract a suitor if we could, play the piano and do some nice little
Very internalized.
Mhm. I think there's also something to be said about how imagination and daydreaming or whatever is something more akin to women, and sticking to facts and solid logic. Logic is something that men are taught. I've seen in canon or in fandom so many men who are against non-canon things. If you think about the division between the fandom that is much more open to like, I like the new Star Wars and the old Star Wars, and the type of people who are like, the expanded universe is the only Star Wars, blah, blah, blah. We don't like this new stuff. There's a very distinct divide in gender identity. And I think that like that speaks to a much larger conversation about how patriarchy is taught to men and to women, or people who identify as men and women, and how men are kind of it sucks to think that like in this way men are essentially told, don't be imaginative, that's for girls,
Yeah.
I hope, my hope is that we see more of a blend in gender contributions to fandom that are positive and imaginative and don't have to be beholden to canon.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, on the note of this, in fan fiction in particular, like less so fan art, I noticed, like, just anecdotally, that men do have the desire to express themselves that way, but because they are taught to stick to the facts and all of this, and the imagination is less encouraged. Like, I've talked about this before, but oftentimes they'll write fan fiction, but they don't call it fan fiction. This is my novel. This is my treatment. This is my screenplay. I'm like,
My
yes, that is the
sex
format.
script.
My spec.
That's the format.
Yeah.
You're correct. This is in script format. This is in novel format. It's fan fiction.
Yeah.
Which is like, and I don't say that in a derogatory way. Like, that's awesome that you wrote fan fiction, but
and it's more
what
acceptable.
it is.
It's always more acceptable for them also to have created some sort of like fan film, because for some reason the concept of creating fan films is given more gravitas than like, hey, I wrote like an 800,000 word fanfic, and people are like, that's cool, that's fanfic. And then they're like, oh my god, this person created a fan film, we should all applaud them. And I'm like, it's the same. It's the same thing. Like, that's really cool that you have like the ability to do that. Like that's an incredible skill to have. But it's the same thing. You're just engaging with fandom and the canon material in the same way through a slightly different lens, literally.
And that's one 300,000 word bodice ripper is not a lesser medium. Simply because
exactly. And it's because one of the things that I feel about the fan fiction is that also enhances creativity, and also it's, let's call it's the true multiverse. the true multiverse, because you explore all the what if scenarios that you want with all the characters, or even with the same characters, but you continue, like what Katrina said about after New Hope. Fans didn't know if there was going to be something after that. So, hey, let's create stories to see what happened next. So I think fanfiction as a community is a welcoming area to express your creativity. And yeah, it would be fantastic that people from all genders feel attracted, like, hey, express themselves without those boundaries or those limits.
I think it's hot when men admit they write fanfic.
Same.
Yeah.
I'll tell you right now, if you want to solve the loneliness epidemic, my boyfriend wrote me a 50-page Star Wars fanfic to court me, and it's worked out great.
Oh, Thomas.
That's Katrina's love language.
Where do you sign?
Write her a fanfic.
Honestly.
Write her a fanfic, dudes. Like,
Oh, just a pause, guys. I just want to say hi, Silver. We love you.
Hi,
Talk about a badass caller of a Star Wars fan.
Yes.
Yeah, I hope someday that men will feel comfortable admitting to writing fanfic, because you know what? I bet a lot of them maybe do, and maybe they just don't put it online. Maybe they imagine, daydream, and they just don't feel comfortable. Do you guys think that since a lot of fanfiction writers have become professional writers, people are becoming more comfortable with fic? Or is it still something that you feel like is like kind of...
The taboo has expanded because now it's like, that's not real writing, that was just fan fiction. And I'm like, excuse you.
Yeah.
Like
the goalpost has shifted.
Yeah, now it's like, no, you have to have written an original idea.
It's like,
or whatever.
So I was bullied in college for writing fan fiction. Like when the people on my floor found out I wrote fan fiction, they like found it and printed it. Like it was a whole thing.
Oh no.
And it's always been like bewildering to me because like somebody on that floor's like sibling is a New York Times bestseller for writing fanfic that would turn into novels.
Oh my God.
And like that's always been so wild to me that like within the same span of years, like I saw that pipeline open up. I watched like from, oh my God, I can't believe you write fanfic, you should jump off a bridge, to, oh my God, I have somebody in my family who's written a fanfic that's now a New York Times bestseller. And it's just very funny to see how it's changed. But then immediately after that gate opened and people started having this avenue, because for the longest time you couldn't publish fan fiction even if you stripped off the numbers. After that avenue opened, everybody was really excited. Then you had 50 Shades of Grey, which kind of ruined it for a while because then everyone was like,
well, some people were saying in a different way.
Yeah. Turn their nose up, and then it settled down again, and then you start to see that. And now once again, you're seeing people being like, oh my God, I could totally tell that this was, could you? Because you bought that book, you read that book, you saw the cover of that book, and then you didn't know until you logged onto TikTok, and then we're like, oh my God, it was a ship I didn't like. I can't believe I enjoyed it. I must be offended.
Honestly, though, some of those covers, like Adam and Daisy,
nobody's pretending.
Nobody's pretending otherwise. That's the thing. But, okay, here's my thing.
Authors are hiding it. They're saying it's dedicated to the rats. Like,
no. Oh God, I unleashed the Raylos.
Yes. It's 42 minutes. We haven't mentioned Ben.
Like fan fiction. You're writing this fic on the assumption that if somebody has come to this fic, they know who the characters are, they know how they're related to each other, they know what their dynamics is. So you kind of jump in at that point. When you take that story and make it an original novel, now nobody knows who these people are or how they're related to each other. So you have to restructure your book. You have to restructure the story to start at a different point. You're starting like 30% earlier than your fic did or whatever. Yeah. So it's all real writing. They're essentially taking a premise and writing an original novel. Like they're not replacing Ben to something else. Like they're rewriting.
Like the thing about the Raylo fanfiction in particular, because that's something I'm very well versed in, is that most of these were AUs, alternate universes, that were already so far removed from Star Wars that they were already having to make adjustments to the plots. Like some of these, like Palpatine is like, or Snoke is usually like Rey's grandfather or something like that. Hilariously ironic. But like it's a modern AU. Like they're scientists or they play in an orchestra.
That's true.
Freaking excited
about ready for that. Oh my God.
Favorite. I'm so I love that fic so much. I went looking for that at Christmas and was like, where did it go? It's coming
That's
to
where it went.
I
bookshelf.
will tell you that, like, I mean, you guys know I'm not an auntie, I'm an auntie when it comes to Raylo. I love how you support it. It doesn't work for me in Star Wars, but I read that book and it worked there. And that's what I love about
Which one?
the sciencey
Love Hypothesis?
science.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Love Hypothesis, yeah.
I got that in a subscription club and I was like, okay, fine, let's give it a shot. It completely changed it for me. And I
Like,
love
that's
the
what makes
dynamic.
fun.
Yeah, that's why it's beautiful. That's why I love the concept of fan fiction and being able to take characters and personalities that you love and put them into this new scenario, give them new circumstances and see how they deal with it. It makes it so interesting and fun. And I think like that form of imagination, again, removing it from canon, is something that is inherently feminine.
Mhm.
Because you don't
Agree.
see and especially when it revolves around romance. And that's
Yeah.
you know, you can fight about it all you want, but that's the foundation of fanfic.
The what
Yeah,
have I
so-
done look on Candace's face is killing me right now.
Yeah.
We have like 15 minutes left, and there's like kind of like
Okay.
I really want to talk about fandoms and mental health, and
Mhm.
actually how it's important to so many of us.
Yeah.
And there's a really great article on Team Vogue. I'll put it in the notes about they interviewed a psychologist, Laurel Steinberg, and she said connecting with people over shared passions, interests is good for mental and emotional health because it helps create a fraternity-like or family-like sense of security. It's also generally fun to scheme and to get excited about something with others. It gives them a subject to talk about that they know will be well received. So how has fandom helped you in your life? I would like to know.
I could start.
Yes, Arzu.
Right before lockdown, I got really, really big into Star Wars books because I wanted to win an argument. So I decided to read all the I decided to read all the canon books.
So petty.
No, because somebody was flinging canon at me to tell me why The Last Jedi was bad. And I'm like, well, I'm going to read all the canon books so that the next time you fling canon at me, I can fling more canon at you. And then we'll never have the conversation again. So I got really, really into all the books alone. And it was very, very lonely. And it was just me and my books by myself. And then lockdown happened. So not only am I by myself in my fandom, I'm by myself, period. And finding an online fandom completely changed my life. Like, I have, like, look at these besties sitting with me here. Like, it gave me all of you. It gave me so many people who are in the chat, who are not here right now and hopefully watching later. Like, it totally 180'd my life just by having that fandom space. So, yeah, that's how it helped me.
I'll go second because mine technically starts with the books, and this might be long-winded. I apologize. So, like, almost 20 years ago, so I was homeschooled. So, like, I was already very isolated as a child because I'm also an only child. And I went on like a summer camp with some friends from church. And I ended up on the bus going to the camp, and there were 4 kids sitting behind us on the bus, 2 of which were girls, and they were wearing Star Wars shirts. And I was with a male friend of mine who was a little controlling. And mind you, we were like 12 at this point. And he told me not to turn around and talk to them. And I said, screw that. And I turned around on the bus and was like, oh my God, I love your Star Wars shirt. I love Star Wars too. I didn't own any Star Wars shirts or anything like that because I didn't know that you could like wear your fandom like that. Like, in, you know, I was wearing a wolf t-shirt from Walmart. Like that was where I was at that point. And I was like, oh my God, I love your Star Wars shirts. I think like Attack of the Clones had just come out because I had a shirtless picture of Hayden Christensen in my journal that I was taking with me to camp.
Chef's kiss.
And because back then we didn't have cell phones where we could save all of the hot guy pictures.
We cut out magazine photos
and we
glued
slip them
to
into
our
our
notebooks.
proper keykers.
We made collages.
But I befriended them. I befriended that whole group. So the two girls were there with their 2 brothers. I became friends with that whole like group. I still talk to some of them still today. It's like 20 years later. They got me into the Star Wars books like hardcore. I had read some of the expanded universe kind of leading up from Phantom Menace to Attack of the Clones, but then they introduced me to like the Young Jedi Adventure books and like the Jason and Jaina stuff, and like really got me invested in that. And they gave me like book reading lists because they were all reading them. We braided Padawan braids in each other's hair and like came up with the Jedi names and like all sorts of stuff. And that kind of parlayed my experience into fandom in like an even bigger way, because I craved that after that, because I didn't get to see them a lot because they were also homeschooled and they lived like an hour away, which at the time that seemed like so far away. And that really parlayed me into looking for places online where I could engage with people and do stuff that not just Star Wars, but like other fandom stuff that I loved. Really got into like fan fiction, really got into like other TV shows and engaging with that stuff online. I befriended other people. I got into the musical theater fandom. I befriended those people. I've been friends with them now for over a decade. I've traveled to multiple different countries to see them. I got into like another fandom really big, Once Upon a Time, which got me into like, as much as that fandom crushed my soul in so many ways, and I have like PTSD and so many problems from that fandom introduced me to like entertainment journalism in a very different way. Like I had obviously read articles and watched things, but it got me really invested in like how it was made and how television was made, and like befriending people who worked on the TV show as a crew members and asking them questions and like learning things. I got into Nielsen ratings. And I was in school for like historic preservation at this point. And I was like wanting to do all of this stuff about like writing meta, which is basically just writing feature articles, and like doing all of this like in-depth like engagement with media in a way that has now parlayed me into my career that I have. And like everything I have as a person is because of fandom, and it really rooted itself in Star Wars. Like I have traveled to multiple states, to different countries to do things because I love Star Wars. Like what? And that all started because like some snot-nosed kid was like, I don't want to go see this movie. Oh, I really like this movie. Like, it just blows my mind. And none of that would have happened if I had been by myself, just reading books and not engaging. Like it has to do with like the fandom, the passion, the shared experience, the friendships. Like it's such an important part of like existing that I can't imagine my life without it. And
belonging. Yeah.
Can I say like after graduating school, university, and just as an adult, it's really hard to make friends.
It's so hard.
It's so awkward. I've only made like a couple friends outside of college that aren't fandom wise, aren't from conventions, aren't from here, aren't from online. But honestly, I've also made like the best friends of my life that I know are going to be in my life for the rest of our lives. I am auntie to some children, you know, like that's just like it helps, and it just, you know, it grows, and fandom is so important to all of us. It brought us all together.
You're all stuck with me. Sorry.
Yeah, like
yes. No. For example, for me during the pandemic, the lockdown, I had this experience where we were doing. I got to meet you on the live streams, and then we were doing the WandaVision. So there was once Wednesday, one of my dearest aunts passed away, and we were far because, of course, it was COVID and we didn't have a funeral and it was out of town. So that was on a Wednesday, and Friday we had the live streams, and it was WandaVision, which is like a treaty about grief. So I think it was very important for me, like to have that support system. And also writing fanfics during that time helped me a lot, because she was one of my dearest aunts, and she's actually the costumes for Rey, she made them all. So it was, and she was not into Star Wars, but she was like, I'll support you on whatever you do. So she was a seamstress. She did the costumes, and it was a tough moment, but I found that both the Star Wars, also Marvel fandom, being in the fandom helped me a lot to grow. So I feel like that sense of belonging, to have a community that has your back, is really important. So that was really important for me.
Katrina, Britt.
Oh, hi. Yeah. Yeah. So my story is very similar. I mean, it started with my bond with my dad, and it led me forward, and I created so many like important friendships in my life that have lasted to today. You know, one of the people that used to be part of the Web Missies group is now going to be the artist for my comic. And another one of them designs a bunch of beautiful fashion pieces that I get to wear and I get to cheer them on the runway with. And even today, like, you know, most of my career, like, it is here because I am a fan. It is here because I love D&D and I knew how to do marketing, and I landed a job at Geek and Sundry like 11 years ago. And everything sort of spun out from there. And thanks to that, like, I've been able to get close to some of my favorite people in the industry. I've been able to be mentored by people that I looked up to when I was 10, 12 years old. And I have all of you now. And it's just amazing that, like, all of these important parts of my life are foundationally because of fandom, because of these passions and interests that have driven it forward.
For me to bring it back to the Hayden of it all,
Stop.
just
Stop
a little bit, just a bit, just bear with me. So like seeing Revenge of the Sith like summer 2005 really was life changing for me. And I vividly remember being on the top of my mom's car, like under a really starry sky, because we were seeing it opening weekend at the drive-in. And I just remember that really visceral feeling where it's like, I have to like work in this industry. I have to work adjacent to this industry, like film. Just, I knew in that moment that film was probably going to be the greatest love of my life. And it had everything to do with how much I just love that film, and like how my heart just would not stop beating from the moment that Anakin and Padme reunite in that movie to how it all tragically ends. Because I don't know, when I was 5, I didn't really understand what a prequel was, and it really wasn't until that moment that Palpatine was like, from henceforth you will be known as Darth Vader, that it really clued in for me that this was what was about to happen. And it wasn't long after that I actually ended up moving to Florida, and I was a small town kid from Ontario, and all I really had to hold on to was my love of Star Wars, because I moved to a place that was very, very different from where I grew up. I really didn't have any friends at my school in Canada. I was very much a loner. I kind of was ostracized because I was so obsessed with so many geeky things, and it felt like in Canada, you just, at least in my small rural town in Canada, that was just like uncool and unseemly, and like nobody wanted to have anything to do with me. And I was like, it is what it is. And getting to Florida and being alone again, like Star Wars was really all I had. And I remember the moment that I first got into looking up like IMDb profiles, and I looked up I loved Natalie Portman for so long. I remember watching Where the Heart Is and Mars Attacks and all of those films, and I always kind of knew who she was. But I found out who Hayden was, and I found out where Hayden was from, and he was from, you know, Richmond,
Markham,
a suburb of Toronto, Markham. And it really just blew my mind that this guy who is Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader was from like 2 hours away from me. And it really did kind of spark that desire in me that like, all right, well, if he can do this, I can do this. Like, I'm a small town kid from Southern Ontario, and so is he. And he was able to do this. And like, fast forward to becoming a part of like the Star Wars Twitter sphere and everything. And I met so many people, and on my bucket list, like over 10 years ago, I had a thing that said I want to professionally photograph Hayden Christensen and Natalie Portman. And it was just this past April that I professionally photographed Hayden. And obviously I have tattoos of Padme and Anakin, and like beyond the fact that of course people know that I love those two characters, like they really are my personal heroes and the reason that I'm here. And like, I'm so grateful for the friends that I have in fandom, and like I wouldn't have reached some of my dreams without
Britt. We love you so much, Britt.
Britt.
Tony's home.
Tony says he loves you too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tony says, hey.
But
Yeah. Fandom brings people together, and
Yeah.
you know, we're here.
Yeah. And I'm so
Feels-
proud of all of us. Like, look at everyone
Look at
in
us.
this chat.
Look at us.
Like,
Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
who would have thought?
All right.
yeah,
My
you
baby.
guys have done so many amazing things in all of your like. Sorry, Britt got me all choked
I
up.
know.
I know.
In all your fields of interest, and it's all because of this passion and the people that you find that give you that launch pad and that basis. And I'm so proud of you all.
And it is fantastic because instead of it enhances, it doesn't take anything of the experience of any other people on fandom. It actually makes it better, and that's
I think one of the best things is that I'm emotional too. Look at that. Oh, such an emotional lady. Is that we've gotten to see a lot of each other on this call achieve those dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Like because of fandom. And we got to be there to cheer each other on.
Yeah.
Every single one of you in just the last year, like never mind the couple years I've known you, in like the last 365 days, has done something so badass and something I knew you wanted to do. And I'm so proud of every single one of you.
Oh God, stop it, guys.
Okay, so let me just say, but for all the guys out there who are like, guys, you know, gender neutral, but we all know what I'm saying. Who are out there like, let me write my
mates
treatment by myself for my very serious, it's definitely not fan fiction thing. This is the kind of cuddly community you're shunning when you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's inherently such a loving place and such a friendly, you know, there's going to be things in here you don't want to engage with, and that's okay. There are people who will engage with that together. You find your people, you find your friends, you find the people who love, you know, adjacent to the things you love. You find the people who will champion you in the things that you do love. And those are the people who make your fandom experience and who make all of this worth it.
And that's really the beauty of fandom, is you can find these subsects and you don't have to engage with things you don't like. You don't have to waste your time with things you don't enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I know it's really hard to believe, but you can scroll past things that you don't like.
You can mute.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah.
There are things in this fandom that are a hard no for me, that I despise. I don't know what that corner of fandom's doing because I have it muted because they're having fun. So why am I going to go in there and rain on their parade?
I know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of corners of the fandom, I just have to say, because we were talking about books, something that has warmed my heart to the very cockles of it is watching the High Republic fandom become a thing on Twitter. Because that reminds me so much of the way I felt when I was younger. Because there are a lot of younger ones. And it makes me really excited to see them engaging in fandom in the way that I did when I did not have that sort of access with the expanded universe, because that was my High Republic as a kid and young adult. I had that still up until, well, it's still with me now, but watching the way that like the excitement for every new book, every new comic, for the Acolyte, for all of these things is so exciting. And as somebody who is an elder in fandom, it's really exciting to see people getting into it through these books, because I feel like the Star Wars books have always been such like a key and vital part of fandom for a lot of people, like since the beginning. And like just that has just made me so excited to see. And like it's watching a star be born, basically.
I would totally suggest that if you ever need to have your faith in humanity restored, attend a High Republic panel. I remember going to the big one at Anaheim and just walking into that room and feeling the electricity and seeing cosplayers from books like that. For someone who is an elder in fandom, that's just like, you don't, what? Like we don't even know how half these people look. You have built a costume off of a description and we know who it is.
A geode was out there.
A geode was a giant slab of rock. Geode was at that meetup. That meetup was huge. Like, it's so amazing to see how like broad Star Wars fandom can be. And this also speaks to Trek and a lot of other Lord of the Rings. There's so expansive and large that like you can find ways to celebrate the things you love no matter how little they are, you know? Like I have ships that are under 100 on AO3 and we still find each other. It's great.
Yeah.
I've got ships that are under 10.
Ooh, oh my goodness. Scandalous.
It's just Maggie writing those. But
And
that's
I
the great
will
thing.
read them.
Hey,
Every
that's the
single
Number
one.
one reader.
I know.
That's the great thing. Even if there's a fic out there, they have at least 100 reads on it.
Yeah.
There's an audience anywhere, and
I know.
the internet has brought a lot of bad things, but you know what? It's so great for us, especially who have those micro obsessions. And corner and you know
Anakin
what I love
Skywalker and Padme Amidala.
Okay, that's my
I
more
have
than that.
Shout out to the Dimbo Discord.
In terms of fan fiction, I have found there is no fandom that does it like the Star Wars fandom. If you have ever seen two characters and you're like, I wonder if somebody wrote the fic.
Somebody wrote
I
it.
haven't seen this in any other fandom. There is
I bet they had a
There's
situation.
at least one. For what?
Some things
whatever
I wish I
combination.
did not see.
Sure.
Some things
Definitely
I
some
wish
stuff
I
where it's
could
like-
take back in my eyes.
This is on there, but
No
it-
regrets.
lot of
regrets.
Snoke, lot of Snoke
But-
fanfic out there.
But
Like a surprising amount.
I appreciate their
Bobby,
creativity.
Yep,
That's
yep.
fantastic.
Bobby
Yeah.
exists.
I love it.
Yes, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. And even if
Yeah.
you use characters, like for example, Rogue One actually drove me to write my first fanfic on Archive of Our Own because I was
Jyn and Cassian.
heartbroken. Yeah, Jyn and Cassian. Like, oh my God, what if they had lived? So there you go.
What
Yeah.
if they kissed?
I'm still convinced they kissed in that elevator.
Oh, yeah.
1000%.
Oh yeah, that
That
was
was
totally just cut. Yeah.
100%.
Mhm.
I mean, that's what
I
it's just what's so fun. Like, the thing that I love so much about fan fiction is the fact that like you see something and instantly your brain starts thinking of things that you could write or things that you would like to see written. Like, I cannot imagine my life without fan fiction because every time I watch something, I'm like, am I gonna have to do it myself? Like, I have
Fix
been
it.
fun and
Fix
like
it, fix.
Yes, there
Yep.
is.
Fandom.
And we
Whoa.
do not speak of it, but we
Yeah.
appreciate people who create it and like
Yeah.
it, and we
Yeah.
respect them.
there is
Because that's
actually
what we do in the fandom.
good Palpatine romance fanfics. I'm just gonna say some people are really creative, and if I can say there are good Palpatine romance fanfics, that's like the power of good storytelling and fiction. Just
Mhm.
saying.
Honestly, I'm not going to name the media or specific names of things, but because of fan fiction, it has enhanced my watching of other things.
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
They fill in the
100%.
blanks that maybe I didn't notice, or maybe
Mhm.
weren't actually there because maybe some things got cut, or
Or sometimes the scripts
Right.
are not as good. Yeah.
Sometimes two characters get stuck in an escape pod and it breeds 50 different fanfics about what happened in that escape pod.
And
Did it
every
get
single one is
full?
different.
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
And that's what's-
Every single one.
And that's
There's-
what's so fun.
I love it.
And can I just say, we did not talk about this as a medium, and I feel like it would be very much remiss not to talk about this because I also was very active in this form of fandom engagement, which is fan video makers.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Teaching
yes.
yourself how
love it.
to edit fan videos is a whole different level of like engagement because that is like hours upon hours upon hours upon hours of like learning how to do it, finding the material, editing the material, making sure the material's all in the same, frame rates and in the
Windows Movie Maker.
yeah,
Windows Movie Maker.
finding
There were
Where's my
so
old
many bands I was introduced to because of
Yep.
fan videos. Like I remember first listening to Linkin Park because of Anakin Skywalker numb videos.
Nice.
Evanescent. Evanescent.
I recently just posted where I had done a music video for 10 rows, 9 rows. It was for both of them. Why I dramatically sang it was lip sync because I can't sing.
Oh.
Who Knew by Pink, and then
Mhm.
edited clips into it because I did better videos than that. Do not judge me for that. But I am still so impressed that is a fandom that is still actively alive today because the loot, the the jumps that you have to jump over to actually make fan videos today, when the DMCA takedowns are so strong that people have to like take music and then like change the octaves and like edit it so it doesn't get triggered, and they have to do all this fancy stuff to it. And I'm seeing like most recently there is the Artful Dodger TV show on Hulu, which I highly recommend if you like historical romance. I was afraid that there was no fandom for that show. I watched screeners for it. I did interviews for it. I love that show so much. I saw the first fan video got over 100,000 views in the first week that it was on YouTube, and I was like, "Oh my god, the fandom's alive! This fan exists."
People
like,
want romance. Listen, Star Wars.
I know. Let me
Listen.
tell you, the death grip that song, "The Reason," had on every
my
early
God.
2000s fandom. It was just whatever romance there was, it would always be The Reason with that.
I can't edit videos to save my life, but if you don't think I was making them in my head listening to that song.
Yeah.
I still vividly, anytime I hear the song Wicked Game or Nine Crimes, I think of two Harry Potter, Bill and Fleur fan videos. That were like pieces of art.
I have an
2000.
I have an extensive Anidala playlist, and like I've talked with Silver about this specifically, but there is a song called Arcade by Duncan Lawrence, and that is like the ultimate Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala song. Fantastic. There's another song that I know was used in a lot of videos for them that now I can't remember it to save my life.
Can I just say,
there's
like,
something
with like, just like fandom creation stuff. Yeah, did a lot of video editing, taught myself that. One of my first gigs out of college was working for a really well-known production company, and it was filming and editing short videos for small businesses. So again, fandom again. Everything like I've done professionally can be tied into something I learned because of fandom. And it's crazy.
This is like a little out, but like I want to petition in the anime convention community specifically. There are anime music video competitions, and they are like 2 hours long, and you watch 25 videos, and then there are awards at the end. And I want that to come to every convention because it is
we need
the most
Star Wars.
Yes,
Yeah,
we
definitely
need
Star
it.
Wars.
I would
so
sit for 3 hours, and I would
Yeah.
watch every single one of them.
I would be clapping everyone. Okay, but guys, Evanescence videos, early
Bring me
2000s,
to life.
please bring me back to life.
My Immortal.
Yes, My Immortal.
That's the one. Yeah.
I personally always was into Going Under. Personally, for videos, there was a film that came out. Sorry, this is kind of a side note, but there was a film that came out in 2005, 2006, which was also a micro obsession for me, called Tristan and Isolde, starring James Franco and Sophia Myles.
I did.
And it was a tragic romance.
Oh my god!
It was a tragic romance. The spoiler alert: the last line of that goddamn movie is, "I don't know if life was greater than death, but love was more than either." And I was like, Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala ruined my goddamn fucking life. I cannot get away from tragedy. Tragedy runs through my veins.
Whoa.
I mean, it's called the original Romeo and Juliet. That kind of should have tipped you, Brett.
I mean,
well,
it's fine. It's fine. I'm so like, I think Pocahontas also did me dirty like that too, because that was my favorite like Disney movie when I was 2 years old, and they don't really end happily either. But like, it was just,
did you?
It was just an endless cycle.
My favorite aspect of fan videos, I know we just got way off topic, but I think this is how fandoms engage with things and like create something I really liked about fan videos was I was part of like this collaboration channel where it was ironically about historical like period dramas, and I also have a period drama podcast, so apparently that's just my thing. But and this was like 2007 to 2010, and we would do challenges where we would take characters from different movies, usually within like the same time period, but sometimes we would like come up with ideas, and we would all take segments of songs and we would like edit those people into like making it look like they were in scenes together, even though they were in two entirely different movies. Usually David Tennant was somehow involved. But like in like that idea of like a group of people getting together and being like, okay, this is our song of the month. This is like the characters from these two movies, or maybe a couple different movies if somebody had blessedly done several different historical dramas, and then would come up with a story, and then we would cut the video, and then we would have this like video that like 12 of us had put together, and it was the same song, different. It would show like our style of editing, but it would tell a story. And that's a form of like fan fiction almost, where you're like creating something from something else and like creating a new story. And I think that's something that's really underrated. And I don't ever really see fan videos talked about in that larger conversation about like fan fiction or fan art or like GIF makers who also do the same thing. A lot of
that's what I was saying about fake exchange and stuff like that.
a lot of like the people who did fan videos moved into GIFs when Tumblr became a big thing, and we lost so many great fan video makers because they were like, it's easier.
You know,
CDuff, I don't know. She was always like a really big, prominent fan
she
maker.
was Doctor Who.
Yeah, in Doctor Who. I'm actually mutuals with her on Twitter. It makes me feel very excited. But like I learned so much from watching how she made videos, and then she went into doing like manips and like GIFs and stuff on Tumblr. And like she also ships Raylo and like ships a lot of the same things like Spuffy and 10 Rose and stuff. So like I always knew like certain fan creators that I could go to on different platforms and get the kind of content that I was looking for. And that was always so exciting. She also shipped Captain Swan. So it was really nice to like gravitate towards different fandoms. But like that's a whole other aspect of fandoms is like usually a group of people will move to different fandoms together. I mean, I know people make we do that. Like we move around, we went to Rings of Power. We went to, trying to get them on board for the moon right now.
Something really funny happened to me that I was watching a TikTok video on, I'm a fan of Ant-Man and the Wasp, that ship. And then I saw this fan bit made to Invisible String by Taylor Swift. And I wrote a fanfic on Scott and Hope. And I was like, I wrote, actually, I love this fan bit. And the girl who made it replied to me, oh yeah, I read your fic. That's why I made the video. Oh my God. It's amazing.
I love when that happens.
Yeah. And that's the great thing is like we were talking like just briefly like there's fic exchange and stuff like that. And like we would have like Christmas holiday times where people would just like write other people, like you would get a prompt and you would exchange it a Secret Santa. And it's like you're gifting this creativity. You take your time, you're not spending money on this, but you're gifting it. And I feel like that's such a great
challenge week.
Present.
Like
challenge weeks
or like ship months where like you would have a different like thing every week. Like this would be like fanfic week this week, fan art this week, gift week, video week, and then you'd have like different themes every day. We used to do that in the Castle fandom for Frank Castle and Karen Page. Like that was one of my favorite things, and that used to introduce me to different music as well, because 1 week it was like Hozier was the theme, and then like another week there was like other bands that I wasn't super familiar with, and like I got into like new music. And it's just, I love how fandom is such a collaboration in a lot of ways. It's a passing of ideas and customs, and like it's culture like that, like to the root of it. Like there's so many things that I love about like studying culture that I see in fandom, and it makes me think, oh, this must be why I ended up becoming such like a passionate lover of fandom, because I see a lot of the things that I like about learning reflected in the way that we interact with each other and pass on ideas and lore. And you even see stuff like going back to like Hux's cat, like that was a fandom thing that then became kind of canon.
We love Millicent in this house.
We love
we do.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love
something
that.
Something I did like in the Once Upon a Time fandom and Tumblr was whenever there was something that I would want to donate a charity to, but of course, like I was right out of college, you didn't have much expendable income. I would be like, I'll make you book covers for your fic if you donate to this Red Cross. If you donate here,
so cool.
I will make a video of your favorite character with whatever song you want to. Just show me the receipt and I will create something for you. And so many people, I don't even know if they wanted it. They just wanted to help out. And just like other people did it too, fan artists. And like, we just got like, we raised thousands of dollars because of a community, and
we continue to do that.
There was a big push like that in the Raylo fandom for the National Abortion Fund, I think it's called. But basically, they had done a thing where if you donate X amount of money, you get a fic that's this long. X amount of money, you get a fic that's this long, and you can give me like 3 things you want to see in it, and they would get bespoke fics written for them in exchange for money.
Yeah, and they did it actually back in 2019 when The Rise of Skywalker was released. They donated a lot of money to the Adams Driver charity as well. The mental health for armed forces. Yeah.
I think that's a great note on like Star Wars fandom in particular. Like there are a lot of fandoms that do a lot of charities and stuff, but like we have, I mean, foundationally the 501st, the Rebel Legion, but there's also been, responses by the Star Wars fandom to social issues, like the fundraiser for the Trans Law Center, Star Wars Representation Matters. There's been so many things that have formed to be part of an activist like vertical within the fandom that like foundationally wouldn't happen without a progressive thought pattern, and without the foundational members who are more female centric than most.
Because again, it's getting back to community, which is instilled in us from the very inception of our births, that we are meant to be caregivers, that we're meant to try to find ways to help foster and help people and create community.
Because like Maggie noticed a lot of people complaining, but of course, like when a certain star said some not appropriate things, and we wanted to put our energy into something productive. And that's what we continue to do, is like, instead of just, shouting about it online, we're like, let's do something about it.
I wish in this regard, like what birthed this podcast, I wish there was some sort of like fandom foundation that like helped to like foster, like I wish there was something that I could have been like, oh, I'm just going to donate to this nonprofit, but there are none. So it's wonderful.
I highly recommend Black Girls Code. Just get the nerds out there. Let the nerds, girl code, like that's one of my favorites. They do really great work. If you guys are inspired, highly recommend that charity.
Every time something goes awry in the Star Wars fandom, like, well, I guess I'm donating to the TLC today.
Exactly. We met because of that fundraiser, because you were spearheading that, Maggie. Like I remember that very distinctly. And I think that speaks to like how this fandom connects in such a unique way too. Like when we see people, because I feel like a lot of folks are like, oh, the Star Wars fandom is so toxic. It's so this, it's so that. And it's like, well, these 5 guys over here who are being super loud and disgusting are toxic. But every day when I log into like my various fandom platforms, there's a new piece of fan art. There's a new like repeat of that one. What is his darn name? The character from Andor. His whole speech, like someone will do a full thread on it. Namek, there we go. I wanted to call him Namek, but no, that's Dragon Ball. And I think that is what makes the Star Wars fandom in particular so special, is like we are not only just like a creative like hot batch of people, but we also stick to the foundational values of what Star Wars was and what it is today.
Star Wars taught us to fight for what we love, and that's what we do, fight for what's right. And there's just a couple people who are very loud, but like we say, there's more of us.
We're louder.
We can't be louder if we need to.
I
don't know who wants that, but I can be louder. I can say more, but there's more of us. Just that's it. Is there anything anyone like to add? Or is that the note that we end on? I would like to thank everyone in the chat for joining us.
Yes.
It's been so much fun to reminisce and also rant a little bit. Thank you all, Christina.
Thank you.
Is that Brad or Sarah, Friends of the Force? Krista, Crystal, Hope,
Donovan,
Molly,
Silver.
Everyone, thank you. And thank you, whoever's watching after the stream is over.
Britton's here.
And shout out to our dear friend Molly, who couldn't be with us tonight. She's going through a bit of a rough time at home, but we wanted to let her know we love you. And as much as we wish you were here with us, we are so glad you're taking care of yourself tonight, and you need it, and you deserve all the love in the world and in the galaxy.
Go repost Molly's Max Rebo fan art right now.
Yes.
Yes.
It's
Go
amazing.
Find it
repost
and
it.
repost it right now.
Right. Well,
Glorious.
may the force be with you all.
May the
Live long and
force-
prosper.
Love.
The vlogs in proper.